Welcome everyone. We're going to get started in our newly more compacted room. Hope everyone in the back has my room. Did everybody have a good break?
Yeah.
Yes. All right. Do we have any? Yes.
I jumped for it.
Just to do it.
I moved to approve.
I like the second.
Sorry.
I like this resolve.
Coffee this afternoon.
Already firing.
Sorry. Yeah.
Next time, just gonna say it.
Andrew, is there anything you'd like to say?
Any further discussion? Any corrections or questions? All right. All those in favor of approving the minutes from November 9th, please indicate so by raising your hand. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, the minutes passed. Thank you. President Shaw.
Thank you. So I've been doing a little bit of traveling. I attended the NWCCU annual meeting because I hadn't been to one before, and since they do accredit us and they have new leadership, I thought it was important to go and sort of hear firsthand from their new director. The message for all of you from that, my takeaway was they are very, very, very serious about student success, and particularly closing achievement gaps for previously underrepresented students. They're going to be looking at that very closely, and they're going to be expecting us to disaggregate our data down to the program level. Whoa, did you see that? Yes.
You almost shrunk in your seat as you said
Oh boy. There were some interesting examples from a couple of community colleges and some other programs that, especially in the sciences, about how they're working with historically underrepresented students. So anyway, we're going to be looking at how we get that disaggregated data, how we present it, how you all work with it. Jody and others will really be in charge of that. I'm not trying to manage that. It's just that I came away with the strong impression that we really have to pay attention to that, because that's really what they're going to be looking at going forward. So we'll finish up our cycle, but that's their emphasis in the future. I also drove up last week for a meeting with the governor, Brittany, our student body president, and Gene Stallman and I drove up on Monday and home on Tuesday in all the glorious weather. And it was an interesting meeting with the governor. Basically, she was saying she apologized for not being able to get more support for higher education during the last session, but said that she was very interested in doing better on that in the 2021 session. So that's not the coming one. The coming short session, the 2020 session, she will focus on climate change and preparing for wildfire. And so she's interested in student, I think really rallying students around those issues, as well as anybody else that can help her there. Capital construction came up. We have submitted 3 projects, is that right? Capital construction up for the list?
Yeah, the first one is the big one.
Yeah, anyway, we'll find out maybe later this week or early next week where we scored. There's a new process. The Higher Education Coordinating Commission has now developed a rubric that we believe is a little more fair to all institutions. And so we're all in on supporting the use of this new rubric. Whether it favors us or not, it's more transparent. There's less room for political maneuvering after the fact. So we're going to see how this goes for the next year or two, and hope that it will work well for us and for others. For 2021, she's focused on Oregon's most vulnerable citizens, particularly concerned around housing and homelessness, behavioral health, and higher education. In higher ed, what she talked about was increasing financial aid for students, other supports for struggling students, and then, like NWCCU, really addressing the achievement gaps for underrepresented students. So I'm hoping there's some nice synergy there between the work that we'll be doing for NWCCU and what she will be encouraging HEC probably to focus on. Also more connected learning experiences. When I look at that, I see Democrat on one side. When you talk about underrepresented previously and career connection, I see Republican. So I think she's trying to build an approach to this that will help her win support from a broad coalition. And really that's what she's calling us now, is to help her build this coalition. She really called on the students, and Brittany may talk about this in a minute, so I won't steal all your thunder, but to help get student voices involved. So that was the meeting with the governor. And then the other thing I wanted to remind you, we're doing our meetings with academic divisions. We had the one with OCA last week, and all the rest of them are this week. So we have one tomorrow, one Wednesday, one Thursday, and 3 on Friday. So we get to see a lot of each other this week, but please encourage, and I've asked you this before, but there was a good turnout from OCA, at least for the bulk of it, and I know people have other classes and other things that they have to attend to, but we really do want to get this information out. We want to engage as many people as possible, help everybody feel comfortable with the numbers. So encourage your colleagues to come out to those meetings this week, and any follow-up questions or anything we are happy to have. I've gotten some good suggestions, some follow-up meetings already, so looking forward to doing more of that. One of the things we talk about in those meetings is the Presidential Task Force on Financial Sustainability. I've talked about that in here before. The way I have configured it, based upon what's in the current bylaws for a budget committee, it calls for one faculty member to be appointed by the Faculty Senate. So I told Andrew I would talk about that today. I don't need that person today. I'd like for the group to start working early in January. So if Senate could have a recommendation for a faculty member by sometime mid-January, right after classes start up and stuff, that would be great. I will also appoint a faculty member, and then there's division directors and stuff like that. One thought is that we've had some faculty members who have either shadowed budget when Mark was here, or who've served on the PAC, and those folks already have quite a bit of insight into how a lot of this budget stuff works, so they might be good choices for you to consider. But there's also the whole piece that I'm hoping faculty will get involved in around helping us think about our academic program portfolio and how we adjust that to continually changing students and markets and stuff. So just look forward. I think the most important characteristic for these people in this group is that they can think broadly, think beyond a narrow interest, and really look, represent the university as a whole and try to help us with this very important work. And it won't be, there are going to be subgroups, so there'll be more opportunity for other people to get involved. I just need one person right now nominated by the faculty senate.
And have you already picked the faculty members that you will?
I think I'm waiting to see who you because I'm trying to get diversity, both in terms of all the diversity categories and disciplinary representation. So, kind of wait to see who you. And then finally, we're having the traditional Cabinet Executive Council food supply holiday party We're expecting a very ugly sweater. I'm looking over at Jeremy because he won last year. We have another ugly sweater medal sitting in my office waiting to be awarded on Wednesday. So I know that there are some retirement parties in the library starting at 3 o'clock. I'm sorry that there's that conflict. This holiday party starts at 3:30. Please feel free, go to the library, stay there, and then come over to ours. And if you're wearing an ugly sweater, as long as you're there by 4 o'clock, we'll still get you into the judging. But let's come and all raise a glass together and have a little holiday cheer. That's it for me.
Questions? I have one question on the, by the way, the charge for the task force got added today, so it is in there for everyone to review. On the the task force will achieve success when it has established short-term and long-term enrollment targets. I'm curious, are they going to be looking at just enrollment targets across the entire university, or will we be looking at by program, by division?
Mix is one thing I think that you have in mind.
Yeah, it won't get down that far. Really, the Enrollment Management Council is already doing a lot of this work. Where it intersects with this group is around really how many students are we going to have? What size are we going to be? What's going to be residential? What's going to be online? What's going to be extended programs? It's that kind of thing that's most important for this. But I wasn't planning to set targets for individual programs. That would be Neil's business on the Enrollment Management Council, if he even did it there.
So I have a question. It might go better for Brittany if it's going to be covered in her report, but when you all talked to the governor, did Oregon Promise come up?
It did not.
Oh, okay, well,
You didn't hear anything?
okay. I just, the usual thing, it'd sure be nice if that got re-envisioned so that support was given to all colleges in Oregon.
And we say that periodically.
Yeah.
And maybe under increasing student financial aid, that was one of her talking points, maybe that would be able to encompass. Right now, she's nowhere close to coming up with policy initiatives. She's simply trying to find the things that will work to build a coalition in case, she's likely going to propose some new revenue measures. So what would they look like and how can we get support from our boards and others in terms of revenue, and then figuring out how to spend it, probably come a little later.
Briefly, just an update on the transfer work. The major transfer map work continues. 2998 is the bill that moved that forward. 3 of the 4 original majors have been approved. There's still one that hasn't been, and now the next 4 programs are going forward. It's interesting because as we're looking at our general education, I'm trying to be mindful of the 2998 mandate that requires 90 credits to be, easily and seamlessly transferable. I sat in on a call with a few people last week, and one of the people in the call was representing the community colleges, and we may not get to 90. I don't know if that's going to happen because of just a lot of there are just a lot of challenges. So it's interesting to watch, be thinking about what the task force is doing. At the same time, the universities are being asked to do this work with the 90 credits.
What happens if we do?
I don't know. It's the first time I've heard the community colleges communicate discouragement. That it's just a difficult challenge. I think that they were sort of, thinking that this would be an easy lift, and the universities were the ones who were thinking, wow, this is going to be challenging. And instead, I think it's happening the other way. I don't know. If you haven't been following the work, this is probably not as important. But if you're business, English, education, or biology, you've been knee deep in this. It's just been, I think when it was passed, I think it was a little more optimistic, as many things are in the legislature. So I think business is still trying to work through some of its issues.
So
So I'll keep you posted. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't be doing our work, and we'll have a report on that next week, I guess. But, yeah.
I got a question. So
Yeah.
Who is because CCJ talking to program leads for community colleges?
Yeah, they're in the next round.
Yeah, who's our contact person for that?
It'll be a faculty member, and it'll be up to the program to put someone forward for that work.
Because community college program people have already been contacting us in an email exchange, and so I had no idea what this was.
So that, there's a HEC representative who is working for the community college side, and Veronica Dijon is our representative on the university side. So she'll put out a call for faculty member names to the provost. And so that means I'll be reaching out to you
Thank you.
with a request. Thank you for asking. Computer science is the other one, and then there are two more. I can't remember which ones they are. More to come.
Kimball. So advisory council did meet last Monday, and Linda joined us for a while on speakerphone. Probably the major topic, at least the initial one, was just a discussion to make sure that we're all following the correct procedures for the two division searches that are now authorized, one for BCE and one for the library. And so we discussed several things. Linda blessed that we could go forward, and I think our primary role, may have the details not quite right, was that we would, the advisory council would be consulted as to the personnel on the search committee, and in particular the faculty members. But also, we did discuss for a while the sort of desirability or not, that was possible anyway, of having students on the search committee. And I think we all agreed that it would be fine to have students on there as long as they were engaged and understood the time commitments involved. So, what else did we talk about? As usual, we discussed the agenda. I think the only other thing that's not represented by our agenda here is that we did get a brief kind of update from Andrew about the Gen Ed Task Force and its work. And then I also gave a brief report on, actually I'm on two task forces. One is the post-tenure, post-promotion committee, which we're still not quite there as far as making our recommendations. So yes, Brian beat us. But also Karen Stone and I and Leslie Eldridge are on another task force that will be making recommendations to the Senate about ways we can bring the Senate bylaws into compliance with the CBA regarding expectations for promotion for instructors. So, anyway, mostly just ongoing work.
Any questions, Kendall? Brittany?
So, just to start, I know last time I was here, I told you about the student fee that we were setting that. So, there's some processes that we're kind of fixing up last minute, but it was approved that the student incidental fee is going to be $364. That was only passed, just for clarification, through the student fee committee. So that still has to go to Senate, to me, to Linda, and to the Board of Trustees. So it's not official, but just so you're updated on that. It is a $17 increase from what we're currently paying, but it is the lowest projection that they were offered. So that does mean that they're going to have to potentially cut around $200,000 of student fee recipients. It's not, we can do it. I have talked to many people. There's ways we can do it. We're not too worried. It does suck. Nobody's happy to do it, but weighing the cost of either raising the fee nearly to $400 or having to make cuts to certain programs that we think may be able to take the cuts, that was the better option for us. So they did that about 2 weeks ago, and Senate tomorrow night will be hearing the proposal. I don't believe they will be officially voting on it, but they're going to be hearing it. The ASSU executive orders were issued for all ASSU issues, which were recapping the international student, working with international students in ISA and the international office to support international students better on and off campus. As you may have saw, there was even an article recently about how international students are not coming to the universities anymore, so I think this was good timing for student government to take this up. Also, a ad hoc working on tuition and state funding advocacy, and then a third one to reduce the paper usage around campus. So those will all be starting work starting winter term in January, and I'll have updates on what they're doing. And then last week, or technically the week before, and then last week, I was up in Salem twice. I went to talk about the funding model with Jason Katz, and then obviously I went with Linda to meet with all the university presidents, all the student body presidents with Kate Brown. It was a very interesting meeting, but I think there's still definitely work that needs to be done with it. I took a lot of good notes because there was some things that Kate Brown was touching on that I think we're really doing on this campus, which is really great. One of the things that she talked about was she thinks it would shine really good for universities to work more on cultural competency, which is something that the Gen Ed Task Force has been really working on incorporating, so that is really great. Another one she said is that employers across the state are not having workplace-ready individuals come in. That is another one that, through the Cernet survey, I think it was professional development, was one of their top 5 priorities that they want to see in the Gen Eds. So students want it, Governor Brown wants to see it, so I'm really hoping that's something that will be reflected through the General Education Task Force of how we can put that to work here. So all the student body university presidents were at that meeting with Governor Brown, and we all met up to decide that there obviously needs to be more work done, and while half of us do meet with OSA, the other half are not a part of the Oregon Student Association, so we are going to meet now multiple times a term to talk about how we can each help each other's university. So we're going to all be meeting in Salem again next month towards the end of December to talk about that. And finally, Governor Brown gave advice to maybe have a town hall at the universities before the short session. So we'll be having ours at the January, February. We haven't decided a date yet, but that's in the works. And then we do have a scheduled lobby day on February 13th in Salem. What's that?
Any questions for Gordon? Thank you. And a late addition to our agenda, Donna reached out to me right after I sent out the agenda to you, but it's been a while since we've heard from the institutional faculty side. So what do you got?
Thank you, Andrew. We met November 15th and 16th at OHSU. We got a warm welcome from the president and provost there. One of the key things the provost said to us was that they were really stressing the desire for OHSU to work with other universities across the state to help solve the state's health-related issues. So I don't know if they reached out to us in any way, but they're definitely working on that.
Their provost sits on the provost council too, so.
And then we also have representation, IFS has representation on the HEC Funding Advisory Group, which I think was brought up here. And so they're just starting to reevaluate the process. I have some information if you want to know the details about how that funding model works now, and that they're reevaluating that to see, it's more of the mission differential that they're trying to look at to see if they could allocate that a little better. We also talked to Veronica, and I want to echo what Sue said about the House Bill 2998. 3 of the 4 have passed: biology, English literature, and elementary education. We have some more coming up. Businesses still held up a bit. And Veronica put out a note about some of the challenges that are really coming about. These are things that we had said to the legislators when they first said, we need to do 2998, make it seamless to go to the community colleges. We said, where's the money? How are we going to do this? And so now they're coming back and saying, without the money, without the, we're trying to figure out, there needs to be some kind of portal so that the student is the one moving around instead of that they're siloed in each place with their transcripts. So now we're trying to push back and say we've got to get some kind of funding for the technology limits that we're facing. We also talked about program approval, how it's been done in the past, and some of the new issues that have come up. Not so much the SOU, but more of Eastern Oregon University is putting out 13 programs with a third, what do you call it?
Third party.
Third-party type of program like we did with business and education student, now with academic partners. What does that mean to how it can go through? Apparently, they signed a contract that they will offer these programs, but there's been no curriculum developed yet. And so they're trying to figure out if we all need to jump on that, because I think it's going to become more common among schools, so how do we handle that? We also have representation on the oversight committee for high schools, and so we're keeping an eye on that. They're trying to find some equity in the offering of the classes. We also have started a partnership with Tracy Hutchinson, who is the president of the Community College Council. And as Sue also said, they're having some of the same issues we have. Unfortunately, we say they're not getting the right advising from the community college, but the community colleges are saying they're not getting anything from the high schools. And so how to keep this moving with dual credits and the transfer map is definitely going to be challenging. So I think they're having a little bit harder time than us even with that. So we're trying to keep a good open communication line with the community colleges so we can work together. One of the other things that we've been talking about quite a bit, in fact, we developed a task force and now we're going for the second time on faculty evaluations. U of O has been one that we've modeled somewhat, and they have implemented their new faculty evaluations. They call it the student experience, and it's been fully implemented. They're working on how to collect some of the data because it's more narrative than it was before and what they can do with that, but they're going to work stronger on, and we've recommended that as well with our task force, stronger on the peer review and self-reflection piece more than giving students. So it's really going to be more about the students' experience and less about them evaluating us as teachers. And so we have a meeting this Friday, right? This Friday. Yeah, so the second part of that. So U of O's had great success with that and getting it through, and it's now fully implemented. Any questions? Okay.
Is there any way to find out what programs Eastern Oregon is going to utilize the online service?
Yeah, I do have a list. If I can send it directly to you if anybody else is interested. The contract is public. You might be able to find it on the web, but there was, I think, 13 new ones.
So one of those 13 was approved by the Provost Council last
Okay,
academic year.
okay.
So I think 12 have
still
not.
need to go. Okay.
So that information might be available just looking at Eastern Oregon's
Yeah.
data.
Yeah, and if you have trouble, email me, I can get it. It's a public contract that's anybody else? And I do want to thank our IT team. They were very helpful and instrumental in bringing the IFS website onto SOU campus so that we can maintain it easier. U of O had been hosting that for about 10 years, and they were ready to relinquish it, and the guys in IT were great working with me getting that transferred over. So we've added some new stuff. If you're interested, it's OregonIFS.org, and we're putting documents in there. We've got a little document repository right now that you can put some things, or you can read about some things we put in there. But the model, there's a PowerPoint that came out from HEC that we received on the funding model, so that might explain it. It's kind of complicated, but and then it also shows how you get paid and based on the different programs and different people and all that. So if you're interested, take a look. Anything else?
Any other questions for Donna? Thank you, Donna. All right, now we have, getting into our Votorama. We reviewed curriculum from graduate curriculum from computer science last week, and I do apologize that there is a little bit of a communication breakdown. We were supposed to review some math changes as well, but we're reviewing those today, so we will vote on them separately. So I wanted to ask if there's anyone who'd like to make a motion on approving the graduate curriculum for computer science that we reviewed last week. So, any second? Lori? Thank you. Any further discussion on the graduate curriculum for computer science? All those in favor of approving the graduate curriculum for computer science, please indicate so by raising your hand. Any opposed? Alan's opposed? No, we won't. Any abstentions? All right, it is approved, thank you. And then we do have the new curriculum for math. Were there any questions about that? Questions? I mean, we could waive the 2 week rule if you wanted to. Sherry, do you want to give us a brief?
Well, Campbell could probably tell you more. All they did was clean up the descriptions that were way too terse and tried to flesh them out a little bit.
Pretty good summary.
Any appetite just to get this done?
No. These are just cleaning up the descriptions so that they communicate better.
Mark has made a motion to waive the 2 week rule. Brian seconded. Any further discussion on waiving the 2 week rule for the math changes? All those in favor of waiving the 2 week rule? Yes. Yeah, Brian. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, rule is waived. Do we have a motion to approve these changes?
I will
Campbell
make
moves.
that motion.
Lori seconds. Any further discussion? All those in favor of approving the curricular changes, graduate curricular changes? Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, the graduate changes to math are approved. Thank you. All right, moving into our next piece. This is actually, we have new proposals from University Studies for 2 SOM courses. And I am told by Mark Shipley that they would appreciate it if these got approved this term, because at least one of these courses is being offered next term, and they would like to be able to put on the syllabus that it is an approved University Studies course. That being said, we do have the special session next week, which we would still have to waive the 2 week rule, but it would give you a week to consider, so not pushing to necessarily get this put on today, but are there any questions? Who's here from University Studies? Oh, yeah.
Question?
No, go ahead.
As you said, we approved SOM 211, which is archaeology, prehistory, perspectives on humanity's past. That was previously approved for the F-strand. We've added approval for the G-strand to that class. Is that right? G-strand non-lab. So a student could take that for one or the other, but not the requirements. The other course we've approved is SOM 339, which is Vikings and Anthropology, History of British Society, or Strand J. Those are the 2 that we've moved along to the Senate. We've also considered around half a dozen other courses that are pending that we will be getting back to you on next time. Okay.
Just thinking about the G-strand, just because I've done and written so many proposals, can you tell me just very briefly, or us, why it was approved as a G-strand course from your perspective?
Because, well, I mean, the brief answer is we
so
thought
I'm a
it,
little suspicious, just that it's outside of STEM, it's really what I'm asking.
well, I think I can speak for the rest of the committee that we didn't think it was appropriate to not approve a course simply because it wasn't being offered by faculty from within STEM. So there's an application process that all
I
these
know, do you remember which of the goals is primary?
No.
So those are posted within the faculty center website with the applications that come to us. So if you wanted to review it, Ellen, if you have additional questions, I'm happy to help you with that.
And I
I
can
just
forward
need to
it
see
as
it
well.
And don't we all
More
have
discussion.
access to the drive, right? So there's the, just as we have a shared drive for the faculty senate, there is a university studies shared drive that I believe we should all have access to. So if you don't, we talked to you, Lee, did we get on that? If for some reason you don't have access to it, so the records of the meeting are in there, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And if you have any problems, I have those applications I can forward to you as well. Any other questions about those two? As long as I have your attention, the committee is supposed to have 7 voting members from the various divisions around the university. We currently have 6.
Which division is that?
Well, as best I can figure it out, we don't have anybody from education, health, and leadership. So just a plea for anybody who would like to volunteer, or anybody in that program that would like to lean on somebody. Any other questions or comments from you?
Not for you, but where do we go if we don't have access to the drive that has these and we want to review the
Yeah,
proposals?
I can't seem
I don't
to find
see,
it.
yeah.
Under shared drives, you don't,
Nope.
there's no, what's it called, University Studies
Nope.
Committee?
Maybe it's newer faculty now.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, you know what, I bet it was, you must share with the people who were on the Senate at that time.
I've just asked Gretchen to update to the new Senate.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Because this is our first time to Senate.
Right.
Thanks.
Yeah, and then there should be, oh, yeah, I don't see, yeah, I see, meetings through spring 19, I don't see a fall 19 folder in there either. As of yet. So we'll double check to make sure you all can see that.
And again, if anybody wants to email me, Weldon, Ian at SOU, I can please forward those to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are you not chair?
Yes, I am.
Congratulations. All right, well, so I will entertain the possibility of a waiving of the 2-week rule at our next meeting if you'll feel like doing so. Obviously, we'll see what happens. All right, now comes the big package, the new undergraduate curriculum proposals from last week. We did get a proposal for a new GSWS major along with some new courses to go with that. There's a proposal for a transgender studies certificate. There is a proposal for a health promotion minor and 1 new course for that. And then a package of new courses from SOAN. So I figured you probably want to vote on these separately. So would anyone like to make a motion on approval of the GSWS major and new courses?
I propose we approve the proposed GSWS major courses.
All right, we have a second. Any further discussion on the GSWS major and associated courses? All those in favor of approving the new GSWS major and associated courses, please indicate so by raising your hand. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, the GSW major is approved. Any motion on the transgender studies certificate?
I propose we approve the proposed transgender studies certificate.
Do you have a second? Caroline? Any further discussion on the transgender studies certificate? All those in favor of approving the transgender studies certificate, please indicate so by raising your hand. I might get out early all right, that's approved. Oh, what I do? Oh, I didn't say, is anybody opposed? So I got ahead of myself. Any abstentions? All right. Sorry, that is passed. I got excited. All right, would anyone like to make a motion on the health promotion minor? And of course, Lori.
I propose we approve the proposed health promotion minor and new courses.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, Chris, you guys are any further discussion on the health promotion minor and new course? All those in favor of approving the health promotion minor and new course, please indicate so by raising your hand. All opposed? Any abstentions? All right, so passed. Then we have the remaining sewing courses.
I propose we approve the proposed new courses in sewing.
Yeah. Second. Any further discussion on the new sewing courses for undergraduate, university? All those in favor of the new sewing courses, please indicate so by raising your hand. Any opposed? Any abstentions? So passed. All right, well, we did that very quickly. And now we can spend the rest of the time talking about FBARs. Thank you, Brian.
That's our reward.
Am I the only member on that committee? So we had planned on talking about this a little bit in advisory council, but we spent most of our time talking about the search committee process for the 2 division director searches. So I did think it was worthwhile to bring it back here to at least begin the discussion of where we go next. So I drew out the kind of 3 key questions I thought we needed to answer before we can go anywhere else with the FBAR discussion. Or I guess the four and the 3 follow-ups. So one and 3 follow-ups. So should the FBAR be purely self-reflective, or should they serve as a tool to evaluate pathway performance? And if we should decide that it's more than just reflective, it would seem to follow we would want to know, should feedback be required from chairs, required from directors, and should there be any consequences for insufficiently completed FBARs? So those seem to be sort of some of the key things as starting points.
So I have a lot of opinions, and I'm just going to get them all out there. I think we should use them for evaluating our performance. I'll defend that point of view in a moment, and therefore I have to answer the other 3 questions. My answers are yes, yes, and yes. But I think the key point that we sort of identified 2 weeks ago is this going to be purely self-reflective, or should it be used for evaluation? And I guess my feeling is that we are blessed in our career that we get a lot of freedom to direct our own time. You know, we're not hourly employees. I mean, there's a professional sense of what we do. Yes, we have to be supervised. Yes, we have to be evaluated. But to a large degree, we sort of operate pretty independently, at least relative to other forms of work. But to me, that brings with it a responsibility to both honestly, self-reflectively evaluate ourselves, but also be willing to have that evaluative instrument be looked at. I personally have always wanted more feedback, not less, in most of the things that I do here. And I realize that, you know, there's potential negative consequences in all of what I'm saying, but I just would urge us to, I guess if you like, to force faculty to be serious about FBARs and to fill them out and do so honestly and do so, I guess, even promptly, I guess, talking to the last one. But in return, I really do want honest feedback from the chairs and directors, because both on the negative end of maybe being skirting, barely doing enough, and on the positive end of being rewarded and you know, being recognized for good work, I really think that that's a fair bargain. So I speak strongly in favor of making them evaluative and to have consequences for everybody.
Right?
What kind of negative consequences?
Lori had her hand.
I got feedback from my faculty colleagues, and so I'm bringing that forward. There seems to be opinion that self-reflective and evaluative, it doesn't have to be negate each other, it can be both. There was a sense that could we have one or the other, could the, to be not overly evaluated, the process being time consuming and so forth. The annual PAPRs seem to be a good place that to get feedback from chairs and directors. It's immediate, it's a little quicker than the every 3 to 5 years. That was a positive. And then, what else did somebody else say? Right. Currently, they feel that the PAPRs are now kind of toothless and have little meaning. However, there are other tools already in our bylaws for the administration to evaluate us. So all the evaluations, annual reviews in our first few years, regular promotion reviews, a comprehensive tenure review, regular colleague evaluations, and post-tenure reviews. Isn't that enough? So this person is arguing against the PAPR. And then just another note about the final question of should there be any consequence for an insufficiently completed PAPR. They took umbrage a bit with that. Why should there not be rewards for brilliantly completed PAPRs? Why is the focus on the, you know, finger wagging? So that's an aside. So maybe there will be rewards in our new life. So time for the faculty to fill all this stuff out, overly evaluated, sense that we are being overly evaluated, could we have one or the other? And then the focus on the consequences for insufficiently completed, how about rewards?
And I will note that in the report, that was one of the things you all addressed as well, is that it's possible that we could be, that how we look at the FBAR might also impact on how we look at evaluation across the board, that maybe there are other areas where that could be. Mark, you had a question?
What kind of consequences?
Are you jumping right to the last one there?
Yeah.
Well, I think if you're early, you should get a free cup of coffee. I don't have anything in mind, but I just think that if we're going to ask that it be put, I think it's fair trade. If we're going to ask the chairs take them seriously and reply to them, and we're going to ask the directors take them seriously and give us feedback, then we have to take them seriously and get them to them in a reasonable time frame. So what kind of consequences? I don't know, hold back our transcripts, isn't that?
Okay. So I think it was Dennis that asked 2 weeks ago about the history of perhaps this was. So I asked constituents in social science and somebody that's been here since the Reno administration, and take this for what it is. It's just somebody's recollection of this, but originally they this person believed that it was really self-reflective, but also really goal-setting oriented. So by setting your goals early on, and the premise on this, which is in the bylaws, it says you're required to share these within your program and division, that once those are all kind of tabulated, then we can give resources to help people achieve those goals. So it wasn't really looked upon as an evaluation by anyone else. And even asking this again, even though there was a survey, I had, I think, 6 faculty, and I sent this last night, so I had 6 very opinionated faculty get back to me with their ideas of what it is. And again, it ranged, but I would also just like to remind everyone that feedback is not required in the bylaws right now. So that is something that's sent. If we would like it to have some sort of evaluation, and I've had discussions with people outside the chambers about this, perhaps the evaluation isn't written. Perhaps the evaluation is just, hey, meet with your chair, meet with your division director, and just have a conversation. Therefore, it's not a part of a permanent record, but they are, each faculty member is receiving feedback, is receiving support in some sort of way if they're asking for support, whether that's financial support or a course release or whatever it is. But there is feedback, whether or not it's an official document of feedback, there is work, recognizing that invisible work, which, you know, the Faculty Rewards Committee has said, hey, you know, we need to do a better job recognizing that invisible work. And FPAR is an excellent way, it really is an excellent way to say, this is stuff that I do that it's not, it doesn't fit neatly into other boxes. So, you know, one other thing is the feedback. You know, as of right now, if I was to look, and I've read the bylaws in this section many, many times, it appears that if feedback was required as an evaluation, it would have been written in the bylaws as having some sort. The only word in there, it says the chair must review. And review is a very ambiguous term as of right now. So, you know, we would be changing the bylaws and the Constitution Committee would have to, you know, create language, but. And the other thing that I got from multiple faculty was, and this also piggybacks on the rewards committee, is newer faculty, probably most beneficial, and the newer faculty that replied to my email said, this is a great tool for me, it allows me to self-evaluate. Those chairs that do actually provide written feedback is an excellent, you know, tool for them. Faculty that have been here, that are seasoned, perhaps say that it's not as necessary, I know what I'm doing, which then I would imagine dovetails with your committee's work with the post-tenure. You know, how does the FPAR fit into the post-tenure thing? So, you know, I don't think it's a difficult thing, but once we get the purpose down, I think then everything should shake out.
Brian's reminding me that one of my reasons, that I am working on the post-tenure committee, and I would say our committee's not at all in one voice on this matter, so please, this is me talking about the committee. But one of the things that is clear to me is if you're gonna take the perspective for a moment of looking at seasoned, I like that, seasoned faculty members, and then for a moment even focusing on those that are maybe skirting any kind of minimum lines, there's sort of two feelings that we're holding simultaneously. One is that we think the current bylaws and CBA give the administration the tools it needs to deal with that. But it would help everybody, including the faculty member, I would argue, if a regular FPAR was on register for there to be a sanity check for everybody to be looking at. I mean, right now, if, just hypothetically, over dramatizing, if a person says, I'm exceptional in teaching, I'm exceptional in service, I'm exceptional in scholarship, and yet there really isn't much there to back that up, then a conversation can happen, as opposed to all of a sudden 3 or 4 years past the last colleague evaluation, it feels like somehow a laser's coming down on that person. I mean, just as a person who's new in their career wants to make sure they're making track towards promotion, on a softer level, we want seasoned faculty members to make sure that they're tracking well with, you know, individual expectations, program expectations, dovetailing with university goals and so on. So it just seems like it wasn't doesn't feel to me like an unreasonable thing to ask people to do.
Well, I talked to my faculty about it at a faculty meeting, and we also had varying opinions about lots of things. One thing, it seemed one person in particular mentioned that it seemed like it would be very hard to have one prescriptive thing for the whole university. And I'm not sure if I agree with that person's point of view, but they felt that since the programs are using them so differently, it may be difficult to come up with one thing that really matches what everybody wants to get out of it. People keep saying that this is a really good thing for newer faculty, of which I am one, and I agree it is a really good thing, although we do also have the annual review before we get promoted and before we get tenure. So we are getting feedback in that annual review. I would argue that it's just as important for the seasoned faculty to sort of, and especially for me personally, it's the sharing, right? Seeing what other people are doing, seeing how these tools can work for different people. In my program, we don't share them, and one person even said that they were not interested in sharing with everybody, that they would just, they have a minimal one that they do, that they would share that, but they also have a more comprehensive one that they do personally, but don't let anybody see. So I'm not sure what that's all about, but that was that person's sort of minority view. I think sharing them is a great thing, and I love the idea that this came from everybody seeing what everybody's working on and figuring out how to work together towards.
I mean, the bylaws, I can't remember the exact word, but the bylaws do say that, I can't remember if it's recommended or, I don't think it's required, but it does emphasize that they should be shared. To what level? I mean, I never even knew that because it was never shared in my program, really for 10 years. Maybe in an informal way, just, at a meeting, but nothing where it was designated, hey, let's just talk about our goals, individual goals. It would be basically, oh, I'm planning on serving on this committee and I'm kind of writing this paper, but nothing, formal. So now that I'm chair, I'm going to force them to do that.
Well, you find out what other people are working on, right? Like I had a colleague say something about, oh, we really need someone who could create, online modules to teach things. I'm like, I've done that. I've done that. I'm working on that right now, and I've already done like 3 of them. And they're like, you have? And I'm like, yes, I have. And we're a small program, right? And so if in our own program, we don't know what each other is.
I think it could be different for different size programs. So, I had a couple other colleagues over there, and I backcountry ski with them, mountain bike with them daily, and I know them intimately, probably more than, their FPAR would ever show. But I could see, and so I was told, yep, we need to do these, so we do them, but we never exchange them or anything like that. But I definitely know, in the smaller program, you already know what your colleagues are doing, because you're working with them a lot. So I could see it being more emphasis in the bigger program, where you may not know your colleagues as much. But it'd be nice if we're going to use this. It sounds like there's various levels going on here, and if we're going to use it, let's all get on board and do the same thing for every program. It'd be really nice if we're going to use it for evaluation purposes that we say, hey, let's take our FPAR and let's get evaluated by our chair with it and get evaluated by our director. Now that I've learned what everyone else is doing, I've been doing that now. I'm just like, I went and had a meeting with my director and said, hey, let's pull up my FPAR and let's look at this and see how I'm doing. So now I'm hearing other people, but I was never really informed on that. But I'm doing it now. And I had a fun process of talking about it. So it was nice to see where I stand in things.
Did anyone get a chance to take a look at the materials in the folder, the FPAR report support materials? Shared with us a CS FPAR completion guide and a math FPAR completion guide, and those programs have a lot more guidance on how to use the FPAR and what kinds of materials to put in. I found those really interesting and was a little bit jealous that I hadn't had something like that.
What program is it?
CS and math. So if you go into FPAR task force report, there's another folder, FPAR report support materials. Then there's CS FPAR completion guide and math FPAR completion guide. I'm curious people are taking a look at those. I thought that even maybe adding the bylaws language of saying like every program should have something like that, guiding their faculty on how to use them.
Well, I just want to echo that has been very useful and helpful, both for the faculty and for the program chairs, and I presume for the division director too. Because our feeling is most of these are geared towards the bylaws set of expectations, and right now sort of exclusively under the mantra of the conditions for the levels for getting promoted. But what I wanted to say about that is I think what we want to do is sort of prescribe the least as we can and give programs and faculty as much flexibility as we can with certain minimum limits. Like, for example, I would be loath to say we want every director to meet for an hour with every faculty member, or anything like that. That might be, I think I remember education saying do something like that, which I think is really cool. And I think that, but I would like to have what is done to meet our conditions, have as much reasonable flexibility as possible to fit the culture and size of the programs. On the other hand, it really is helpful, and maybe we put that as a recommendation, maybe rather than a mandate, that people, programs consider developing sort of templates for helping their faculty build those FBARs in a way that will be most useful both to the faculty and to the program.
And that would be helpful to chairs too, because chairs are faculty members who rotate in every 3 years or so. The first 1 or 2 years, they've just been somebody who's been slogging through writing an FBAR and don't have a lot of guidance on how to communicate with their colleagues as a chair in trying to provide some guidance about whether or not they're meeting expectations of the program. You know, that's a real tricky one when you have that feedback among colleagues who, you know, step into a role for a very short period of time, have very little experience and no training in how to help guide that process. So I think those kind of guidelines for programs are very helpful. Sure.
So I stole the CS expectations from math when I started helping them build out some of their materials. If you look at their department expectations and you look at those questions, they're almost exactly aligned. And it turned out to be a wonderful tool when we hired a new CS person, and I wanted to explain to them how to write an FPAR, because this makes it so that you are addressing a sequence of questions rather than saying, okay, I need to talk about my teaching. How much should I encompass? How much detail? And it was really helpful in getting them on board and getting good information to me, since I did the annual evaluations for the first 2 years. And so it was just a pattern that aligned with all of our systems well. And so obviously I would advocate for something like that, even though I don't have a voice to encourage it.
Yeah, thanks. So I took the conversation back to my department and the faculty, and a couple, I think, important points came out of it. One is that we talked at the last Senate meeting that the FPAR is a good way to share invisible work. And I think people understand that, but there should be some benefit, right? If we're using the FPAR as a way to store information about invisible work, then there needs to be some reward for that, for showing that work. There needs to be some formal way of rewarding that. The sort of follow-up to that was also recognition that there's some differences or diversity in ways that divisions are using the FBAR in the feedback process, like education was highlighted from the model. And that's a problem, actually, if invisible work is being shared through the FBARs and then it's being used differently across divisions, and it's not equitable. So that was a concern that came up. The other thing was, I think Andrew used the term task force fatigue at one meeting. I get the sense that a lot of faculty feel an evaluation fatigue with the FBAR, and that we have chair evaluations, colleague evaluations, and everything. And so if the FBAR is evaluated, it should be integrated with those other systems of evaluation. It shouldn't be necessarily a separate process. So those were, I think, the big things that came away from me from talking about this.
I guess I support, I don't understand the private nature of public education, because from my view, everything we do should be public and transparent. So if we are getting paid by the taxpayers to educate our future citizens, it's all public. Everything we do, there should not be like private development money is going that is being paid by the taxpayer. So I think our FPARs and what we do as professionals we should be held accountable in some way. I do hate getting those messages from Digital Insight saying my FBAR is late.
We don't have that. Those are the consequences. Every minute.
So that, and I'm not sure what part of that is late, but I'm getting them every week, you know. So if it is a faculty initiative, which Brian has said, we shouldn't be getting that from this digital place, whoever's telling us to do that. It should be from the faculty senate. If it's a faculty, if it's a faculty initiative, historically, then how did it cross over into digital supervision? So, not that I'm opposed to the accountability measure, because that's what my philosophy is. As a public employee, we should have everything public, including everything we do, and document it, publicize it, and if necessary, get credit for it. But the credit is not, I think we're already getting paid to do that. Maybe it's not as much as some people would like, but that's not the issue. So, that's my position on that. Just,
Would it be a reasonable approach to say, just as we do with departmental expectations for promotion and tenure, to say there need to be these elements? Yes, feedback needs to be provided. Yes, it needs to be shared. Yes, there needs to be some mechanism by which, if you don't do it, something happens. But just like the departmental expectations for promotion and tenure were developed specifically with that department in mind, could we not say your FPAR plan as a department has to include X, Y, and Z? Yes, yes, yes to all of Kemball's yeses. But how those look in your department can vary, because not every department is going to have the same culture, as Chad brought up, or the same number of people, or the same number of programs underneath that department. The invisible work may look different. But say, here's a skeleton we expect, and that involves guidance to new faculty, as like Sherry created. It involves all these things. But how you do that, that's create that plan for your department, and it lives right next to those promotion and tenure departmental expectations.
Certainly can do that. I think to that point, they would have to live next to those, because if we just said, yeah, every program could have their own tenure guidelines, but we could put it down somewhere.
Right.
I think easily within a few years, we said, what are the guidelines?
So one of the other issues in the survey, and as Paul said, the whole, what is it called, time lottery, I think is what the rewards committee called it. If we're requiring feedback from chairs, some chairs have a lot of faculty. That's a lot more work that they're obligated to now do compared to other programs that may only have, 3 or 4 faculty. 3 or 4, I think there'd be like 4 in my program, which, that can be done over a weekend, but, I imagine business, for example, has 20-some faculty. That's a lot more work on top of the chair for them, so I mean, by obligating feedback, which I think is a good thing, that's gonna unduly impact larger programs, education, business, psychology. So I mean, that's something to consider about how, now maybe that CBA talk about loading, for whatever, but, that's a lot more work on some chairs compared to others, speaking of the equity across divisions, but programs.
Well, just to speak directly to that, in theory, you may not agree, but in theory, larger programs, chairs get more release. That's one of the 2 big components in the formula, the number of faculty they supervise versus, and also the number of students that work in the program. But it just occurred to me, I may have misunderstood Mark's question earlier. Did you mean consequences to the chairs and directors for not getting his feedback?
No.
Let's talk about that.
Dennis has answered the question, I'm going to get it now.
But in seriousness, it seems to me that, to be candid, okay, let me just, side example, which I think is relevant. When I was chair and looking at my faculty's teaching evaluations, just teaching evaluations, my system was pretty much, if a person was getting all outstanding, I said, good job, pen and a piece of paper. That was my evaluation of the teaching evaluations. If there were some very goods, I might look at a few, go a little bit deeper. Obviously, if there was a near competent, or especially, of course, if there was an incompetent, then I did a deeper dive. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, to some degree, I would hope that map that basic philosophy to I think you've got to go a little deeper than that, even at a minimum, to look at a person's FPAR. But, you know, I'm thinking in terms of a program chair and probably even a director, looking at, say you're self-evaluating yourself at outstanding, and almost at that point, just, if a supervisor, either one, the chair or the director, felt, yeah, that's fine, that looks good, that looks good, that's good, then it's a fairly minimal, looks good, and, you know, keep up the good work. But if there's a big disconnect, then that's the time when you would want a little deeper dive on the feedback. And yes, I am bringing in a little bit the perspective of what we're going to recommend as a post-tenure review committee, because, you know, right now, that would be a way in which potentially a person's mismatched with their own evaluation of themselves versus what a supervisor looking at the bylaws and their program's expectations, that's a way that they could get signal that there's a problem.
Well, another approach might be to have departmental personnel committees, so it's not resting on one faculty member who resides in the chair for a short period of time, but have the personnel committee actually take a look at those FBARs, in addition to, or at the request of the chair, or some combination thereof. It would be a little bit, I think, a little broader, and it would open it up more to the faculty department.
I like the chair's feedback and the director's feedback, because there's check and balance there with both people making comments. I think the word insufficient is dangerous, because you know, looking at my colleagues, their FPARs are great, they're beautiful, and they're very detailed and, you know, fully describing what they're doing. So I don't really know what an insufficiently completed FPAR looks like.
You should look at mine.
And I would be nervous if language like that went in bylaws, because I don't, you know, some people are more verbose about what they say in their FBARs, and some people are a little bit more succinct, and so that scares me a little bit, what that means, insufficiently completed.
So would you like to share an example?
You didn't disagree with me.
Well, I thought of Mark actually, when he said that, based on a comment that I think you made in your promotion application, which was akin to, and I'm paraphrasing, so correct me if I'm wrong, I wish I would have been on top of my FPARs a little more.
Would have made my tenure committee
That's right,
easier.
and I think that really stood out for me, because it does speak to the insufficient information issue. If it's not there, it's hard to go back and recreate, which is in fact what you had to sort of do.
Yeah.
So, and this goes to what Michael was saying, I've been on faculty personnel committee, the last committee that makes a recommendation to the provost office for promotion and tenure, and I was on it 2 separate years. Generally speaking, program personnel committee comprised of your closest faculty, thumbs up, good to go, you're all good to go. Chair, thumbs up, you're all good to go, everything's usually rock step, ready to go. It's not till the directors where you see a little bit of a different perspective on the evaluations. So I mean, if we're looking to provide feedback, you know, perhaps the directors are the, you know, I'm giving a lot of work to the directors now maybe, but you know, perhaps they're the ones that provide the most crucial feedback. And I agree that, you know, as a chair, you're supposed to say, okay, here's a possible issue, but you know, I've been working for somebody with 11, 12 years, and now for a 3-year span, I'm, you know, the first among equals, and I have to do something and say, hey, you know, I didn't know this, but you're not really doing your job as well as you appear to be. Let me go back to the faculty, and when you become chair, now you can throw the book at me. So I don't know if that's, you know, and I'm not saying we would or not, but, you know, that is kind of a strange dynamic that we have as a chair. We're faculty, I mean, we're part of the union, we're faculty, so giving feedback besides you're a good job, it would be hard for me to give feedback to them saying, hey, maybe you can do better. Maybe I just don't have the skillful means to be critical in a constructive type of way, but I'm done talking about the issue. I've been talking about this for weeks.
You told us.
Now you see the dilemma that Joan, Anna, and I have when trying to come up with something. I mean, there is conflicting opinions on the purpose. There's conflicting opinions on, even somebody said, hey, June 1st is not a good enough time for us. So I didn't want to open up that Pandora's box of when the best time to have them submitted by. But directors, I believe, are on full-year contracts, right? So in the summertime when they're not working, maybe that's a better time to provide feedback, in the summertime. But it'd be nice to have feedback in a good time, so when you're preparing for the next academic year, you can, make those goals reality.
Can I add one thing? I heard something earlier, I just wanted to correct it, or maybe misunderstood it. But I think someone said that there are enough tools that the administration has to evaluate us. I just want to note that I don't see the colleague evaluations, they don't come to me, I don't have to sign off on them. I do see them when when a promotion application comes forward. The chair evaluations for probationary faculty, I do see, I read those, I sign them. But I don't comment on those, and so the administration, these are not tools that the administration uses. We will occasionally remind folks that their colleague evaluations are out of date or haven't been properly or in a timely way kept up. So we have that information, we provide that for folks. Some folks need to know when they're due for a colleague eval, especially if they're thinking about going up. We provide those kinds of information points or data points, but that is not a tool for administration. Yeah, so I just want to make sure that folks understand that, because that's simply not the case yet.
Any further questions?
I was just going to stick my neck out for Cynthia's question about, I have gotten, I'm not saying I got that this year, but I have gotten a colleague evaluation who said, my teaching is outstanding. My student evaluations rated me outstanding and nothing more. I have gotten an evaluation who said, I did no scholarship and I don't plan to in the coming year. So I get a lot where people are thoughtful and put time into it. But there are a few where all I can say is, I don't see anything in what you've given me in this half a sentence that supports your statement of what your rating is at all. At the minimum, I would want chairs to at least get the faculty to do that before I see them, because it's really hard for me to evaluate someone on ghost. There's just nothing there. And so at some point, I do think there should be some teeth in that you've got to at least submit a reasonable case. I love TERS, I don't want to have to read 16 pages, but I want some substance to what the remarks are. And I think, it's a minority, it's a small number, but anything that could encourage that, we've gotten a lot of improvement in it in recent years. But I think for some, it's just hard to put that kind of time into it because they don't see a value coming back out of it, and they have some old habits that have persisted.
Well, thank you. I think this was fruitful, and I'm sure we will continue to discuss it at advisory council and bring forward more guidance on how we'll keep working through this.
I just have one more quick question about the guidelines here. It says teaching and it says T1, T2, T3. Is that evaluated? Is that like a level? Like T1's better than T2?
No, those are just the bullet, those are just
bullet points.
Yeah,
It's numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4 under teaching.
Yeah. Yeah.
Versus S 1, 2, 3, 4, which were numbers under here. No. It was just went with the list that's on the expectations document.
Good, thank you.
All right, thank you. Announcements and new business, Lee?
Just so everyone knows, the University Studies shared folder has been updated, and the folder that had these documents were made visible, and everyone who is currently on the Senate now has access. So you're good to go. And if you have additional questions or are uncertain of anything that's posted or you want something else, please let us know, and we'll provide it.
Thank you.
I wanted to follow up on Charles's call for somebody on the University Studies Committee, so it said they needed somebody for EHL, right? I sent a lot of emails out this term trying to get people for the committees to sign up, and the volunteers have really dried up. I'm not getting more volunteers. So if you could go to your constituents and push to fill, that would be really helpful. We still also have one opening on the faculty development committee because we had added 2. One of those got filled, but only one got filled. So we could use somebody from EHL or library or undergraduate studies on faculty development.
I did put a note in the, I shared an email in the folder for today from, I think, not housing, but yeah. But anyway, the Pancake Feed is Wednesday, December 4th, from 10 p.m. to 12 a.m. They are looking for faculty to participate in helping out with that. So please share that information with your programs. You can find that email there. And did want to give everyone a heads up that, again, we meet a week from today for our special session with the task force. It is likely that no materials will be forthcoming before the late Friday. So if there are materials to be shared, there'll be weekend reading only. Otherwise, come to the meeting and be surprised because the task force is going to be working too much until the last minute to get some things done there. But I did want to know, because I did send out in the email, trying to get feelers for whether or not we need a bigger space. Has anyone heard about a stampede to get in the room for this presentation, or are we, do you think we're good meeting in this space next week? Yeah.
I do, because I think not only will there not be anybody else but us.
And the task force. That's fine, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure, and that's why I didn't want to go book a big room and it's like 5 people, so.
Usually our Simon Hall should do.
All right, well, that's what we'll do. Any other announcements for new business, Jeff?
So we did our trip to the Balkans last year, and tomorrow's our big presentation. It's going to be from 6 to 9, but really 6 to 7 is kind of light refreshments and reception, and we have a little exhibit hall we're going to be working on. And then 7 to 8:30 is going to be a multimedia presentation with a video and the students telling their stories, lots of photos, and then we'll have a short film, and then we'll have question and answers between 8:45 and 9. So that's tomorrow over in Nice from 6 to 9. We'd love to see you.
Actually, that just reminded me that in the Mies room of the library tomorrow at 6 p.m.
Oh, got some competition over here.
The Film Club is doing their film slam, so if anyone wants to stop in, it's kind of video open mic night, so students bring in works in progress, and if you want to pop in and check out some student films and give feedback, and come and go anytime.
We had food at ours. So.
Film slam. All right, anything else? Look at that, Mark, I got you out
Really?
like 6 minutes early. All right, thank you all. Enjoy the rest of it.